Okay. The goal of every nation is a simple one: to find unity in the midst of great diversity. Nations face great challenges constantly. These could be environmental due to climate change, internal or external political changes, or social challenges like poverty, inequality, maybe food insecurity. One thing is certain though: without this unity, balancing a nation's social, environmental, and economic goals will not come easy. So this leads me to ask the question: has India achieved this goal? What do you think? Far from it. Just open up any newspaper and you'll see a different story. We are united only when confronted by a common external adversary. And in its absence, our unity dissolves into petty squabbling and one-upmanship, despite the underlying identity that we share as Indians. Various stakeholders are in direct or indirect conflict with one another, each with their personal agendas to win at all costs, even if this win is achieved at the cost of the larger identity that we share. Whether it's our economy, our environment, or our elections, this sense of unity is noticeably absent in India today, along with trust in one another. The thing is though, trust is like a muscle. We lose it if we don't use it. And with our trust in each other broken, our goal of uniting against the internal and external challenges that we face seems to be running away from us. And doing more of what we've already done so far will only get us the exact same results. With 20 years of experience in responsible travel and as a systems thinker, I've been very fortunate to meet some people from various walks of life while experiencing different cultures. And I've observed a thing or two about how humans relate to the ecosystems around them. And this has helped me formulate a more relevant way for India, and in fact, even for individuals, to take a different approach to the problems I've mentioned earlier. When we encounter a different culture, we all do something very interesting. We look to the people around us to get our social cues, to understand what behaviors and actions are acceptable in that culture. As an example, when I travel to Ladakh as part of my work, I always wish passers-by a happy Julle. Julle is a Ladakhi word that can be used to greet someone, or to say goodbye, or to simply acknowledge another human being sharing the street with you. Back in Mumbai, where I grew up, greeting a random passerby like this with a warm smile and a wave of the hand would mostly get me strange looks. But in Ladakh, where this is common, I very quickly picked up this practice by observing my friend Stanzen, who used it frequently through the day as we walked around his hometown, Leh. So why do we instinctively observe others when we find ourselves in an unfamiliar culture? It could be because they have more experience of that culture, and following their lead is the option that's most likely to work for us. Which brings me to another interesting question. If learning from other people's experience is the right thing to do in an unfamiliar social context, why aren't we learning from experienced sources in other contexts? And what are these sources that we can learn from? Actually, there is an important and experienced source very close to us, who we can observe and learn from. Now, this source happens to be the greatest ever success story on the planet. Let me repeat that: the greatest success story ever on the planet. Can you guess what the source is? It's nature. Just like any country on the planet, nature also faces persistent challenges. However, despite 4.5 billion years of turbulent upheavals, nature has not just survived, she has found amazing and creative ways to adapt and to flourish. In his book, Ishmael, the author Daniel Quinn has this to say about nature. The community of life that we see here at any given time isn't just a random collection. It is a collection of successes. It's the remainder that is left over when the failures have disappeared. So there we have it. What we experience today as nature is not a random collection. It is the greatest success story ever that this planet has witnessed, the result of billions of years of adaptation through trial and error. And there is one indispensable lesson that we can learn today from nature. A lesson that can help India achieve her goal of finding unity in diversity, of becoming stronger and stable, despite the many challenges she faces. Our lesson begins with a story. Sometime in the 1980s, a young couple moved from the city to a farm they'd purchased in the Western Ghats. They wanted to grow and sell strawberries to a local jam company. Very soon, though, they noticed that cats would come into the farm at night and damage some of their crop by clawing at the fruit. Very angry at this loss, the husband staked out the fields at night and he shot the cats. He was certain this would solve the problem. What happened instead is that birds started pecking away at their strawberries. The cats had kept the birds away all this time. But the couple was still very upset. So they tried another strategy. They laid out poison to kill the birds. And their strategy worked. No more birds damaging the strawberries. They both were ecstatic. They had managed to protect their precious strawberries after all. But the story isn't over yet. The moment the birds disappear, insects, which the birds had kept in check, started to eat the strawberries. And that's when the couple realized that losing a small part of their crop to nature was not necessarily a bad thing. They also took back an important lesson that day, that everything on this planet is interconnected. But why should the story of interconnectedness matter to us at all? It matters because the challenges we face today as a nation are very similar in structure to the challenges that this couple faced. They're complex with many layers and interconnected parts. They have multiple stakeholders with their own needs and agendas. And when we impose our predetermined solutions on these kinds of layered challenges, it only leads to problems at another level. Challenges like these constantly change over time, and they change in ways that are not easy to predict. What they require is an in-depth understanding of the complexity of the real world. And this can only happen when we shift our perspective from thinking in silos to thinking in systems. Unfortunately, as a nation, we've already chosen to focus on one perspective, the drama of everyday events. The damage caused by the excessive flooding of a river, farmers and their families killing themselves in rural India, the Indian cricket team winning or losing a major tournament. With these kinds of events at the center of our attention, which is a classic example of thinking in silos, this is a tempting scenario in so many ways. The media can use these disturbing, scandalous, and unbelievable events to keep their 24/7 news cycle running nonstop. The powers that be can use them to divert our attention from other, more important issues. And we, the citizens, can spend our leisure time giving expression to our outrage with sharp words and provocative arguments with family, friends, and complete strangers on social media. Sure, focusing on the drama of everyday events works beautifully if our goal is to keep the status quo alive. However, if we are serious about taking on India's most challenging and complex problems, we need to shift our perspective from the events themselves to the relationships between these events and their interconnected parts. We need to focus the spotlight of our attention on the connections between things. When we do that, underlying patterns, structures, and beliefs start to reveal themselves. And instead of getting sucked into the riveting events of the day, we can now re-examine these structures and beliefs that inevitably give rise to these events in the first place. We need to stop spending all our time and energy on putting out fires and spend more time asking, what's causing these fires? An associated lesson we can learn from nature and its interconnections is the importance of diversity. Take a moment now and imagine yourself walking on the seashore, or in a beautiful tropical forest, or in the bleak barrenness of a desert. No matter where you are, though, they all have something in common. Each has an abundance of animal life and plant life going about their lives around you, looking for food, building homes, marking their territory, wooing each other, and building on each other's actions, like bacteria turning fallen leaves and dead organisms into fertile, rich soil, ready to accept the next generation of seeds from the vegetation around them. While what is visible to us may look like nature at rest, there is an intricate dance going on behind the scenes between the thousands of different life forms coexisting in that space. And each and every one of these dancers, the elements in that space, is vitally important. Without them, the larger system is incomplete. And with its parts missing, the system cannot function as it has evolved to function. Diversity then is the key to stability. The more species there are in nature, the stronger nature is. Remember the quote I had shared earlier. Every single species on the planet today is here because it is a success in the community of life. And in our hankering for convenience and consumption without limit, we are destroying the planet's biodiversity by imposing a one-size-fits-all approach to how we produce, use, and discard things. Our global economy is built on a thinking in silos foundation. And because we are now imposing the exact same philosophy to how we live and work as a nation, we're destroying our cultural diversity by emphasizing and centralizing certain beliefs, cultures, and practices over all others. Even though these other cultures and practices have evolved to be the most appropriate ones for a certain region or for a community constrained by a unique set of conditions. As we enter the uncertain era of climate change, I wonder, whose responsibility is it to tilt the balance towards thinking in systems? I believe it's up to us, the citizens, to do so. The people at the center of the existing system have too much to lose: their wealth, their power, and their influence. In the 74 years since India's independence, we've had an assortment of social, political, and economic leaders of different ideological stripes. And yet the one thing most have had in common is thinking in silos. They've spent decades building up a certain narrative, one that is based on a flawed foundation, an erroneous representation of the world. And we have sadly gone along with it. It's time to drop this perspective. It's time to build relationships and strengthen diversity. It's time to live as if everything is interconnected. I'm going to end my talk with another story. And because I want to make sure you don't forget this talk, this time my story is about a toilet. But this isn't any ordinary toilet. It's a special kind of toilet that has been in use for thousands of years in a very unique region. A region we started this talk with, Ladakh. On my first visit to Ladakh 15 years ago, I arrived there dusty and tired after an 18-hour-long jeep ride from Manali. And being a city slicker, I'd avoided using the facilities. Well, mostly because there were no facilities on the highway back then. And I had two choices: going behind a large rock or not going at all. And being young and stupid, I chose very poorly. 18 hours later, as we reached Leh, I didn't even glance at the majestic landscapes. I threw my backpack down and ran to the nearest toilet. But I was in for a complete shock. There was only a hole in the ground and no water tank. I quickly looked around to see if there was at least a bucket or an overhead tank. But no, there was nothing there except for a pile of sand and a shovel in one corner. So the urgency of the situation kicked in and my brain processed all this information rapidly. Hole in the ground, pile of sand, shovel. Yes, I had to shovel sand into the toilet instead of water. So a few minutes later, happy as a clam, I asked my friend Stanzin, with whom I was staying, about this unique toilet. And this is what I learned. Because Ladakh is a high altitude desert, water is available easily only during the 4 to 5 summer months, between May and September. The rest of the year, this water is mostly locked up in the form of ice in the numerous glaciers all over Ladakh. And in order to save this precious water, the Ladakhis created this unique toilet that not only saves thousands of liters of water every year, but it also works as a closed loop system where human waste is allowed to break down over a year or two, and it's then used as manure in their fields. Imagine that. No water wasted and free fertilizer created out of the food that we eat from the very same fields. Now compare this with the millions of liters of potable water we waste every single year in our cities. This is the beauty of solutions that are designed keeping in mind nature's most important lesson. Everything is interconnected. Thank you.